Summary of Shaping the Game. The New Leader's Guide to Effective Negotiating. By Michael Watkins. Negotiation and Leadership. Leadership is a matter of leveraging relationships to achieve objectives. An organization's systems, structures, and strategies are important elements in the leader's toolkit, but relationships are, at least, equally important. Leaders tap the power of relationships through negotiation. Less hierarchical organizational styles place an even greater premium on negotiating ability. Without authority based on rank, leaders must rely increasingly on influence and persuasion, so learning better negotiating skills is fundamental. The first negotiation most leaders encounter is the discussion that secures their leadership positions. Careers go through phase transitions, from school to work, then from one job or organization to another. Negotiating these transitions successfully demands focusing on creating value. New leaders must identify the relationships, interests, and opportunities that can help them create value. Capturing value. It is not enough merely to create value. To advance, the aspiring or new leader must ensure that he or she benefits from the value created. Building and maintaining relationships is share power instead of seizing too much solo value or authority. The image you present matters, and being perceived as a selfish manipulator doesn't help. Building the right reputation, show that you are tough, creative, and trustworthy. Understanding negotiations. Negotiations have two important elements, structure and process. The 6 components of structure are: 1. Parties and issues. The parties are the participants, the issues are the items on the negotiations agenda. 2. Alternatives and action-forcing events. Negotiators can select these options instead of taking a negotiated or unwanted agreement, or leaving the negotiation. 3. Interests and trade-offs. Interests are concerns that matter to negotiators, trade-offs are items they are willing to sacrifice to preserve their interests. 4. Information and uncertainty. Information is a source of negotiating strength, especially when you have more knowledge about your counterparts than they have about you. Generally, the more you know the better. However, some information can be costly, and some may be simply unavailable at any price. Thus, negotiations usually include an element of uncertainty. 5. Positions and packages. Your negotiating position is a collective aggregate of your demands. In many cases, negotiating with a focus on interest, not positions, makes sound sense. However, focusing on interests requires the parties to trust each other enough to allow each party to explore and assess the other's concerns. When the parties don't share such trust, focusing on positions may be more fitting and productive. 6. Value creation and capture. Forget winning. Negotiate to create as much value as possible and to capture an appropriate share of that value. The definition of what is appropriate will differ according to the nature of the negotiation and the relationship. Overall, negotiations have 4 phases. The go or no-go phase is exploratory. The architectural phase establishes the rules and agenda. In the framework stage, the parties begin to outline trades that create value and to set guidelines for an acceptable agreement. In the final detail stage, the parties make offers, counter them, and finalize value creation and capture. Several activities take place incrementally during these phases, including small steps and big bangs. Diagnose whether the parties are taking exhaustive leaps or using little steps that build up over time. Different negotiating power bases or situations may dictate this choice. Taking small steps can let the parties build trust through achievable agreements, but it can also enable your opponents to grant you only modest gains and to subvert implementation. Everything depends on context. Learning and influencing. Throughout any negotiation, both parties simultaneously try to learn all about each other and to influence each other, so the picture can get complex. For example, first offers create anchors that can determine future perceptions about the bottom line. Yet, don't be gullible about interpreting a low first offer as meaningful data about the other party's bottom line. They could float an initial offer to try to anchor your expectations or influence the outcome. Adding and eliminating. Savvy negotiators carefully analyze the other party and its agenda. In general, seek good partners who also want to create value within a sustainable relationship. Avoid negotiating with bad counterparties. Be sure the agenda does not contain any unnecessarily explosive items that will subvert negotiations. The agenda should be broad enough for valuable trade-offs, but not so expansive that it creates unnecessary complexity. During the negotiation, continually assess the participants and the agenda to ensure that the right people and the right issues, and only those people and those issues, are present. Bundling and unbundling, look for ways to aggregate or disaggregate agenda items to enable mutually advantageous trade-offs. Sometimes, treating several issues as a single package may hasten the negotiations. Other times, breaking complicated, difficult items down into their component parts may help you to reach agreement quickly on some matters, while you keep working on the tougher items separately. Sequencing and synchronizing, decide whether to address issues sequentially or simultaneously. You may gain a first mover's advantage if you handle issues or parties one by one. However, links among the parties or the agenda items may mandate synchronous negotiation. For example, someone moving from one job to another may be better off negotiating with several potential employers at once. For principles of strategic negotiation. These strategic principles are an integral part of shaping the negotiation game. They should be your guidelines whatever and whenever you negotiate. 1. Match strategy to situation, make your strategy fit every specific negotiation. Each time, consider relationships, conflicts, potential gains, lines of authority and coalitions that unite the parties, connect agenda items or link to other negotiations. 2. Plan to learn and influence. Learn as much as you can about your counterparty's concerns since you may be able to influence how they perceive their interests. 3. Shape the game. Your objective is to influence who the other party may be, the agenda for discussion, and how participants see their interests and options. You want to be able to change or redirect that influence as negotiations proceed. 4. Organize to improve. Negotiation is part art, part science. It's perhaps best thought of as an art with an underpinning of science. Experience in negotiation helps people become better negotiators, because certain mental skills develop with practice. As a general rule, to fit your strategy to the circumstances at hand, manage the negotiating relationships, a great source of value as if you intend for them to last. Every negotiating session may help build or break your reputation. Of course, conflict enters all negotiations. However, negotiations aimed at creating new value, such as working out a business contract, are clearly different from dispute resolutions. In a dispute, excess conflict can distort perspectives so much that people may seek revenge even at the cost of gains that would leave them better off according to any reasonable calculus. Your strategies about sharing gains will differ depending on whether the parties are negotiating to cut a pie or to make a bigger pie. When the size of the pie is fixed, negotiators have no incentive to share information about their interests. But when negotiators are creating a bigger pie, information sharing does no harm. Most negotiations, however, occur in the murky middle where you must be cautious about what you reveal. As a rule, sharing information about general interests is harmless, but divulging data about your bottom-line position is foolish. When sharing information, take small steps and look for reciprocity. Identify people with the authority to consummate agreements and get them to the table. Be aware of alliances that may lead the other party to form coalitions. As an alternative, exploit favorable coalition-building opportunities or break coalitions that oppose you. Be aware that negotiations may be linked. For example, someone may negotiate with several parties, but only intend to settle with one of them. Or, the outcome of one negotiation may rest on the result of another, such as when a new venture needs capital to get skilled people, but cannot attract capital without skilled people. Create links that advance your interests. Plan to influence other people by convincing them that your objective is in their best interest or that, even if it is not the best thing for them, it is the best option they can get. Prepare by learning the other party's context, priorities, and probable positions. Even thorough advance work can miss key information, so add to your knowledge by listening actively during the negotiations. During sessions, phrase your questions to elicit as much data as possible. be sensitive to words that could provoke defensive, hostile, or curt responses. Repeat your questions, phrasing them differently, to see if you've received consistent answers over the course of the negotiations. Rephrase and repeat the answers to check that you understood and to show that you listened. Use hypothetical cases to explore the depths of the other party's opposition or commitment. Understand their mental model and their frame of reference. Address their risk perceptions, their values, and their idea of what is good. Part of shaping the game is pruning the other party's options to direct them your way. Use unbundling and bundling to help present acceptable choices. Balance reasonable and excessive commitment, as well as pre-planning and improvisation. Richard Holbrooke, the U.S. diplomat who led the negotiations that ended the Bosnian War, advises, be firm on goals and flexible on means. Begin negotiations with a sharp understanding of your goals, so you can make astute trade-offs. Change happens during negotiations, so organize any unfolding modifications to improve your position. When you understand your objectives, you will know whether to block a change, shape it, direct it, postpone it, or delay it. The negotiation's place and time can make it easier or harder to create change. Decisions you make early in the process can determine if certain strategies will be possible or precluded. For instance, finalizing the agenda may clearly remove some items from the table. Adept negotiators detect patterns of risk and opportunity in the noise of negotiation. They imagine and anticipate how others will react to certain events or proposals, and they balance their management of both substance and process. They devise feasible alternatives and rapid responses under pressure. Most crucially, experienced negotiators think about what is happening along the way. They step back to get perspective and adapt if necessary. Becoming a good negotiator requires studying and reflecting about actual at-the-table experience. Consider what went well, what didn't, what surprised you, what critical steps changed the direction of the process, what you might have done differently and what you should do differently in the future. Examine your performance at every stage, in light of the 4 key strategic principles. Build your skills and your staff's skills with coherent training programs led by experts with theoretical and practical expertise. Base your training on simulations and personal attention. Sustain it over time. Start with these steps. Use a common negotiating language so people can share experiences and collaborate with each other. Establish an institutionalized apprenticeship. Require after-action reports based on a retrospective analysis of negotiations. Rely on templates that clearly, systematically present what the organization has learned from its reflection on negotiations. Continuously update your checklists, guidelines, and rules in light of new information. Reward learning and knowledge sharing. Give everyone a stake in the common success, and do not work against it by stoking internecine competition.